All right, good afternoon and welcome everybody to the January 18th, 2019 version of MVP Office Hours. This is Jackie Travieso. Normally I'm joined by Jared and Dale. Neither of them could attend today. However, I was able to reach out to Pete Lyons, who's on with us today, and he's going to help us answer questions. So Pete, you've been on the last couple of calls, but I don't know that you've actually had an opportunity to introduce yourself and give yourself an official hello to the group. You want to go ahead and do that?
All right. Well, my name's Pete Lyons. I'm based out of the wintry wonderland known as Buffalo, New York. For those of you who aren't familiar with Buffalo, New York is a very big place. I'm probably about as far from New York City as you can get while still being in New York State. About an hour south of Toronto, actually. I specialize in Einstein Analytics and anything that is clicks, not code, including process builder, workflow rules, any kind of declarative automation, visual workflow, stuff like that. And I also host the Let's Play Salesforce YouTube channel, which has about 12 hours of content focused almost entirely on Einstein Analytics. And that's me.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for that self-introduction there. Pete, would you drop a link to your channel in the chat so everyone could access that? I have not heard of that, so I want to definitely check it out. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So as you can see on your screen here, we always like to kick these meetings off with a little bit of support for our community-led, usually called Dream and Events. Some of them have a little bit of a different name, but they're all community-led. You can use that first bit.ly there, that bit.ly.sfdreams or /sfdreams to go to the Salesforce inventory of the various events that are happening. We've also got a new bit.ly that we can use, one list, and capitalization is important there, so it's ONE, all caps, lowercase LIST. This is a community sourced, new, getting up and started website where we can go in and put in any kind of events that we are hosting, where we want to get a larger audience base. We want to advertise it larger. If you're running a user group, this is a good place to put it as well. And again, it is all community sourced. So if you have an event, you can go ahead and add it there automatically. Also like to draw a little bit of attention to the two links at the bottom: joining a Trailblazer group, and then signing up for your meeting invite. So they're two different things now. Joining the Trailblazer group is the chatter group, but then signing up for your meeting invites is through another tool. It's a Salesforce branded tool, but underneath it, it's Bevy. So it's a meeting platform. So make sure that you are signed up for the groups that you want to be signed up to, so you can get those meeting invites. All right. Let's see if I can get my keyboard to work here. There we go. All right, so as many of you know who are repeat attenders, for those of you who are first-time attenders, this is basically an open Q&A call. There's really no structure to it except raise your hand in the chat or go ahead and speak up during times of dead air. Ask your question. Any question is a valid question. If you're looking for recommendations, how-tos, personal experiences with Salesforce, things like that, you are definitely in the right place. This group meets the first and third Friday of the month. Our next call is February 1st. And like I said, everybody is welcome to participate, and please share your experience. Everybody has a different experience with using Salesforce based on the cloud that you're in, the type of business that you're working with, and then of course just your everyday business rules. How do you run your business? I think everybody's on mute. If not, go ahead and mute yourself just so we don't have any background noise. And then to ask a question, again, in the chat, you can raise your hand, and then feel free to just unmute yourself and announce yourself, because we're still getting familiar with voices and names. And then you can also use the chat to post any resources or links or additional questions if you happen to be joining in and not using a phone line or don't have voice over IP. And then we can also share your screen if there's something that you want to demo. I just caution you that you're in a sandbox. and or not sharing any company privileged information. So with that, for those of you who are new on the call today, we've got 3 other groups that are MVP office hours across the world. We've got the EMEA group, we've got a Portuguese group, and we also have an APAC group. If you want to follow them on Twitter, I've got their Twitter handles listed there. And I highly recommend that just because we've got MVP Office Hours Portuguese, if you don't speak Portuguese, it is not a problem. Carlos does a fantastic job of translating and keeping everybody involved. So I've attended a couple of his calls, and it's worked out great. So if we can share our knowledge and information down there in Brazil and the Portuguese speaking areas, they greatly appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to jump out of my presentation mode here, and let's go ahead and open up for questions. Now, Marty's got her hand up. I know that she's ready to go. Marty, I'm going to unmute you, and go ahead. The floor is all yours.
Great, thank you. So my question is, has anyone had any experience using Data Loader where you are exporting files out of one Salesforce instance and importing into another? So I had the content version and the content document link exported, and I was trying to import into a different group, and I had a couple of issues. So my main question is, has anyone had an experience doing that?
I can take this one. So in general, when one of the biggest hangups that you're going to run into when migrating multiple objects from one org to another is going to be with your IDs. So first, I always recommend going from top to bottom. So if we use a simple example of accounts and contacts, you're going to want to load your accounts first, because on insert, your success file is going to have the new IDs for all the new accounts that you've created, because the ID of what it was in the first org is never going to match the ID of what it is in the new org. And then you're going to need to use Excel to do VLOOKUPs to recreate those keys so that you can your child record.
So let me, I'd done all of that, and this instance also included about 6 custom objects. It's when I got to the documents that were attached to some of the objects that I had the real issue, and I finally allowed me to import a document, but it obviously wasn't done correctly because it wouldn't allow me to do the correct preview. So my question was specifically because you are correct in your explanation, and as I was saying to Jackie as we started, it was quite tedious because there were about 6 custom objects, but it was specifically the documents that I was having a problem with. If anyone has any experience with that specifically, I'd appreciate it.
I don't, but it looks like Jackie's looking for something right now, and I can also try to find some links. I know that this can be a headache. While I haven't had to do it personally, this is something I often hear complaints about in the office. So I'll look into that as well.
Great, thank you very much.
And one of them that I was recommending before we even kicked off the call, and this was, I just could not remember, Excel Connector. I'm pretty sure they can do files, but what I don't remember is if, oh, that's pricing. That's not what we want. What I don't remember is if it was from org to org, or if there was a way to download them. Let's see if we can find anything on here. Marty, I'm going to drop this link in chat just so you have it in case you want to spend some time going through.
Yeah, thank you. Luckily, I've solved this particular issue, but I'm sure there's going to be a next time.
Absolutely, and that's a great question. That's not something that I've had to deal with. So, okay. All right. Did you have any other questions, Marty?
No, thank you very much.
All right. All right, who else has a question? This can be something that you're currently working on, something that you're getting ready to investigate. Trailhead certifications.
I've got a quick question. It's Bruno.
Yeah, Bruno, go ahead.
This will be a quick, easy one. I went into a sandbox and designed a flow using the new, pretty awesome, actually, once you get used to it, Flow Designer. And then I went to deploy it to production, and I'm like, why does it keep bombing? And then I noticed it's because it hasn't been upgraded production to the new version. Does that mean I have no choice but to rebuild that flow in production right now if I don't want to wait for the next release?
Well, the wait's not really all that long.
No,
You should have it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And technically, there's an option under process automation settings that is checked by default that says disable Cloudflow Designer, which is what turns off the old flow builder. Unfortunately, once you have edited any version of a flow that's been edited with the flow builder cannot be opened in the Cloudflow Designer. So if you just made recent changes, and if you look at the list view of that flow, you'll see you'll see Flow Builder for your newest one, and then Cloudflow Designer for all the previous versions. If you uncheck that box, it'll re-enable the old designer, and then you can open any versions that were previously open. So you've only really lost changes since that update. But mind you, that update was probably, 2-3 weeks ago for you? So that might not help you out too much.
Okay. Well, that's true, though. Process automation settings. I'll check that out. I didn't think of that. So thank you.
Have you looked to see when your org is going to be moved to Spring 19, your production org?
Yeah, I went into Trust and looked. It's like February 13, but it's, it's one of those things. It'd be great if I could get it in sooner, but I realized that too. Okay. Good. I have somewhere to go. Thank you.
Super. All right. Who else has a question? I'll put a question out there while everyone's thinking and mustering up their courage. And really, you don't need courage to ask questions. But, and Pat and I are meeting after this call to talk about his particular product. But I'm going to go ahead and ask this question. Has anybody done any kind of a product comparison for SMS or text messaging from Salesforce? Pat has built a product that does that.
Yeah, I can offer a little insight, but I'm not a bias.
It's a project that I'm working on, and I thought, hey, if anybody's put together any kind of product comparison, or if you are getting ready to look into this, or maybe you didn't even know that you could do this, you can. So Pat, go ahead and share what you can. Sure.
Well, I'll here's a caveat. This is a product that I'm selling, so I'm biased here, but. So when I started learning Salesforce in June of 17, what was out there for SMS there were maybe 5 or 6 or 7 products on AppExchange that are that call themselves SMS apps. The main ones are like SMS 360, SMS Magic, or maybe it's 360 SMS, SMS Magic. There's one, Mowgli has got one, and they've all got different different features. But ultimately, they were all built, and by the way, they've all got tons of customers and hundreds of reviews, and a big head start on me in the market. However, the reason they've got a head start on me is they've been around for several years. They were built for Classic, and even though they've updated themselves to look like Lightning, it still feels like a Classic app because you have to launch their app and you're in it, and it doesn't really take advantage of any of the power of Lightning to integrate SMS smoothly into the workflow. So what I wanted to build was a component that was about the size of the messaging app on your cell phone, and therefore could drop into a console utility, or could drop into a tab, or could be standalone on the page, and on any page, on a home page or a record page or wherever, and be integrated into the flow. So it's always where you want it, and it knows where it is, and it takes advantage of has record ID, so that it's offering up the right context when you want to start a conversation. The other thing that I noticed was, because most of these apps are really built as marketing tools, not as one-to-one communication tools. They're built for the blast, to send out 1,000 or 10,000 or 40,000 SMS at once. And that didn't feel like something that, in my experience with Salesforce, that I would use. I didn't have any need to send out a blast. I just wanted to be able to talk to my customers or my leads, whatever, through text. So that's what I built. Primarily is a one-to-one text tool. So that's how I've differentiated myself from the others. About a year ago, I guess it was in April last year, Twilio, and Twilio is a back-end API for many, if not all of these providers, including me. They provide the connectivity into the telecom world. So we just send basically an API call to Twilio, and they take care of sending it out, and I don't have to learn anything about carriers or any of that. So anyway, Twilio came out with their own API or their own product sort of in beta called Twilio for Salesforce, and they sort of soft launched it in beta mostly to nonprofits. And their goal with that, they've built up their site and their capability and their automation. Really what they're trying to do is provide enough hooks into Salesforce so that you can go on their site and set up an account and buy numbers, and basically they can cross-sell you from SMS into voice and into voice conferencing and video and all the other services that they want. They're really trying to pull you into their ecosystem, which is great. I mean, it's an impressive variety of capabilities, but I think the way I differentiate myself is I establish all of that behind the scenes. You never have to leave Salesforce to do any of that, or establish a separate account, or be billed separately, or anything. So that's how I'm differentiating myself from Twilio for Salesforce. And by the way, my product is called Proton Text, if you want to look it up on the App Exchange. So the pricing, the other thing about the pricing, mine is usage-based only, so there's no licensing fee. The other ones are really aimed at sort of, again, they're aimed at the marketing user that's going to be doing a big blast. And, they range, they're per user per month. Some of them pretty expensive. Some of the ones on there are like $500 a month per organization. I don't have any of that. I've just got, basically you pay for your phone line and you pay for your texts.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that, understanding a little bit of the differences. Is there anybody on the line who is using this and using a text MSS product in their org or alongside their org?
And just as clarification, SMS is just a plain text. MMS is when it's got any sort of media inside of it, a picture.
Well, that's good to know, because I didn't know that. So MMS equals pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
All right. Who else has a question?
And thanks for the free commercial.
Of course. Who's working on a project that they're stumped on?
I will share. I was at Cactus Force last week, and it was great. That was the one-day developer and architect event in Phoenix. They were very strategic in figuring out the date for it. They made it the day after an off-site planning meeting for Salesforce. So they did have a lot of Salesforce execs there, including Greg Ruiz, who is the manager of Lightning and Lightning Components, and Chuck Liddell was there also, along with Don Robbins, talking about the soon-to-be launched Lightning Web Components. LWC is what they're calling them. Which is a way, you'll likely hear a lot about this. I don't know how many devs we have on the line, but basically LWC is a way, they've opened it up so that you don't have to write Lightning components, create new Lightning components with Aura. Aura has been the platform for creating the layout of new custom Lightning components. And that's not a commonly, that's not a common platform out there among front-end web developers, as opposed to something like Angular or React, both of which I know nothing about, but there are a lot more of those React developers and Angular developers, et cetera. And so what they've done with Lightning Web Components is to make the way that you build them, they're still supporting, you can still write them in Aura, or you can write them in LWC. And it's clear, like Lightning versus Classic, LWC is the place that they're going to be investing for the future. It seems like the whole point was to open it up so that more developers can access and create in Lightning, and so that what Greg said was, you know, they had tweaked Aura to be as fast and performance friendly as possible, and they didn't know how to get anything more out of it by sort of opening it up to a broader open standard of web development. They'll be able to take advantages of any performance improvements and you know, industry advances that are made in these other platforms. So I've just started learning how to write these things, and there's not a whole lot of documentation. There's one trail about it on Trailhead, and it doesn't really, you know, it gets you to the point of writing your first Hello World component and sort of stops there. So I'm sure there'll be much more coming, but that's Lightning Web Components.
Great, thank you for sharing that. The Forcelandia out of Portland at the end of June, I think it was. Let's go back and look at this. That is developer based too. So Forcelandia, July 31st. So if you're looking for a developer focused community event and you're going to be in the Portland area, or you want to make a special trip, that's another one of the events. Put on your calendar. All right, Marty, you've got another question.
Yes, as long as no one else is gone. So I wouldn't say I'm stumped now, I'm more annoyed. So I had a customer issue where we had changed the pick list values in a field. And it was in the opportunity object. And after they were changed, when it was being validated upon lead conversion, it was erroring out based on some keywords, some of the pick list values. And after going probably 10 back and forth with Salesforce support, their solution was to undo the validation for lead conversion to opportunity, which, air quotes, did resolve the problem. The only other solution is to nuke the field, rebuild it, and obviously all the data maneuvering that goes along with that. Customer decided they didn't want to do that. But it turns out that that causes another problem with opportunity, and long story. So my main question is, has anyone else had this issue when you change pick list values and now it's erroring based on pick list values? And is there any other solution that, other than the redoing the field, that anyone came up with?
No, that makes no sense at all. Go ahead. I agree with you. That's annoying.
Yeah, that's like.
So my assumption here, and let me just make sure I'm following along correctly, is that you have a custom field on lead that is being mapped to opportunity on conversion, and that sometimes this is failing.
That is correct.
So I would recommend two paths. Either you need to mirror the updates you made on the opportunity pick list on the lead object, or unrestrict the pick list, because restricted pick lists will prevent you from putting in non-compliant values. So for example, if I have a north, south, east, west pick list, and that is marked as restricted, or that's not marked as restricted, I can data load the word sandwich into that field and it's going to work just fine. And I can also write to this field via Apex or Process Builder or whatever. And behind the scenes, it's just any old other, text field. The system doesn't really know. But if this is a restricted pick list, the system is going to enforce almost like a validation rule that whatever I'm putting into this field needs to be consistent with the options that are available. There's also the distinction between the pick list label and the pick list API, which could potentially cause issues as well. But I wouldn't expect to see that unless your issue was, we changed the labels but not the APIs, now we're seeing issues. If we simply changed our values from north, south, east, west to maybe northeast, southeast, something along those lines, then I think that what might be happening is it's a restricted pick list and you're attempting to push non-compliant data into that field. So if updating what's on the lead is not really an option, you can unrestrict the pick list, and what that's going to allow you to do is push these non-compliant values in. But if your options in the lead are like sandwich, burrito, taco, and your options in the opportunity are north, south, east, and west, and you allow these non-compliant values to be pushed over, while it's not going to cause a system problem, it may cause a business process problem.
So they do match. The field actually is called number of employees. And so they changed the ranges of the numbers of employees. And they do match, but it was set up as a global pick list because it was something that they were using in different objects. And global pick list does not allow you to unrestrict the pick list value. Yeah,
are you able to tell the field on lead to also reference the same global pick list?
Yes,
which may require.
Done. Yep, no, that was done too.
Are you seeing this only
so
with
we're now
value?
into about the 6th call with the Salesforce support, which as we went through this, and I would say no, you can't do that, and then they'd call me back. Yeah.
I'll share one little piece of just kind of like out there information.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with another consultant this very week who said they do not currently use global pick lists because of funky things like you just mentioned.
Good information.
So while the intention of it is great to manage your pick list,
yeah,
there are some, I guess, behind the scenes, and I can't quote what their issue was, but I can just tell you that what they said was we are not using those currently. We love the idea of them, but they cause us more headache than they do managing multiple pick lists.
Because it certainly, that makes sense now, because it certainly makes. The reason I'd set it up that way is it's certainly, based on what that field is, it's certainly something that this is a startup and something that they're potentially are going to change frequently. And it just made sense to be able to do it in one place rather than multiple, but good advice.
Yeah. So if you're going to go create 2 separate independent pick lists and map them and validate them or what have you, yes, it's going to be a little bit of an effort on your part to move the data, but that's relatively painless in the world of data moving.
Yeah, and it's not that big a deal today as opposed to what it would be later. So okay, thank you very much.
Did you have any other comments, Peter, or anyone else?
No, I agree. The only solution that I could think of was, downgrade them from global to non-global pick lists. But again, that does carry the caveat that now you have double maintenance, especially with a field that you imagine is going to be evolving a lot over time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yep. Good advice.
All right, who else has got a topic they'd like to discuss?
Hi, this is Lori Rickards.
Hi, Lori.
This is my first time attending. So first of all, I just want to say thank you.
Well,
And
welcome. We're glad to have you.
so, yeah, and John, who I think dropped off, he's one of my colleagues who mentioned this to me. I'd gone to him for some help on the project, and he said, "You need to attend this." So I don't have a project that I'm working on right now where I need help, but I'm glad to know that this is a resource that's available. So this is really exciting. So thank you.
Great. We're absolutely glad to have you anytime, and we welcome any question.
Awesome.
And if we don't know the answer, if somebody on the line doesn't know the answer, we usually know somebody who either knows it or knows somebody who knows it. So
That gets you closer, right?
yeah, get you closer. That's the goal. All right. All right. Any burning questions? Any discoveries that y'all have made recently that you want to share with the group?
Probably a really, really narrow use case. But I figured out how, I'm, as I mentioned, I'm real big into Einstein analytics, and I'm also real big into flows, and I'm always looking for ways to combine all my favorite things, even though it's not really a common use case. But one thing that people have expressed issues with in regards to Einstein analytics dashboards being embedded on record detail pages is that, well, first off, it's not live data. Now, we can get around that to a degree through either SOQL step types or Apex step types, where we can basically, there's a little bit more coding involved on the dashboard side of it, but we can get real-time data. So what if I'm there on my opportunity record and I'm interacting with my record in a way that's going to change data that's being represented on that dashboard, and I need it to refresh? I actually figured out how to get flows to refresh that page for you. And the broader implication of this also is, what if I have a flow that is modifying the record that I look at, and I'm on screen 3 and I make a change, and then that updates the record? Well, now I want to see that on my details tab, because maybe I've got my flow on the right and I've got my details tab on the left. What I observed is, if you have no screens after the last DML in your flow. So for example, you have a screen that says, okay, thanks user, what do you want to change opportunity amount to? And the user changes the opportunity amount. Then you have a node that says, okay, go update the opportunity record. And now the flow ends. It'll force a page refresh. So I figured out from that, what we can actually then do is kind of just have like almost a bookmark field on the record, or a way to look at properties of the record to deduce what stage of the flow that we should actually be at, possibly even using the stage variable within flows. But just something I've been experimenting with a little bit. Silly as it sounds, I'm trying to make the game blackjack using Einstein analytics and flows. So that's why that was my use case why I needed it to refresh. But just a cool little tip, if you're interacting with flows and you need them to update the record that you're looking at, make sure don't show any screen after that last record change. The page is going to refresh, and then because the flow is embedded on the page, it's going to immediately begin to start, and you send it into a decision element that says, well, where did I leave off? And then direct the flow to the appropriate screen to resume and continue your work. Nifty little trick, not a whole lot of usability for it, but just something I figured out recently.
Interesting that you're using Salesforce to build a blackjack game module. I'm not sure what, but
Why not?
why not? Exactly. I love it. Absolutely. When you get it all built, maybe you should do a demo for us.
Well, when you finish that, maybe you can build Minesweeper.
There you go. There you go.
Well, I was building Risk, but it's just so complex.
A little more challenging.
So what it actually started with was I needed a really good developer submission for Dreamforce 17, because I was like, oh no, how am I going to get there? Because I was casting as many lines as I could, to try and get a speaking position, because if I could get a speaker position, then my pass is free and then my company would send me. So one of my attempts was, well, maybe if I build the board game Risk, clicks not code, maybe that'll be something cool. And it totally got shot down. So I more or less abandoned development on it. But for me, my thing is I solve riddles, which is to say that I remove obstacles that are in my path. And if I don't have an obstacle, how am I going to learn about something? So something like a board game, I look at the rules of a board game or as a business requirements document where I know that my system needs to be able to accommodate this sort of action. And it gives me a great opportunity to learn and explore things that I never would have pursued otherwise. And I'm doing it in my free time, so I don't have to worry about burning up a client's time on, research and development, just going in some random direction. So when I look at the 3-page handbook for how to play the board game Risk, that to me looks like, okay, the business has come to me and said, this is our process. Now go build it in Salesforce. It turned out to be way bigger of a project than I ever would have anticipated, but it was a really good way for me to kind of take my learning beyond what I could get out of a trailhead and really, have that rubber hits the road kind of moment without somebody giving me that problem to solve.
Peter,
Cool.
I don't think that you realize you just wrote your next Dreamforce presentation submission, because that is an excellent use case, because people are always asking, how can I build, what can I build, and all of that. I think you just hit the nail right on the head for a presentation to those who are admins who want to become developers, or admin-elopers, I guess is what we call them now. And I think that would be a fantastic presentation.
I think I'm going to take you up on that and submit it.
All right, there you go. There you go. Marty, do you have another question? Your hand is up. I wasn't sure if that was from last time or.
Sorry, no, I didn't lower it.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem. All right, I do have a question for you, and I think this might resonate or be good for everybody on the line, regardless of experience or use with Salesforce. In the olden days, as we can call them now, in the classic world, you could take, let's say, any field, the name, the API, and you could change that. And if that field was used in a formula or a workflow, you didn't have to go to those other pieces and update them. If you changed the API name, then it or the field name or whatever, it would automatically carry over into whatever those other pieces and parts were that were using that particular field. We've discovered, now this is not a field, but let's say an email alert. You're working on something, it becomes something bigger than what you originally started out, so you relabel it, but you've used that in a process builder. We learned that the process builder API name does not automatically update. Has anyone come across that? It still uses it, but it's not called the same thing. Does that make sense of what I just described?
Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. I haven't seen it though.
Okay, something to just be aware of, especially when you're building change sets and you think that something should be there and you don't recall that you renamed it. That renaming does not come through. I don't know about formulas, and I'm talking about Lightning here. I haven't tested formulas, but it definitely did not come over in Process Builder for the name of an email alert.
So this is Marty. If anybody's looked at all at the, where are we now? Spring 20 Sandbox release.
Spring 19, yeah.
Spring 19.
Yeah, the new one. I was just looking at this yesterday, and I was looking at something, and there's a new feature on the field that says, it says beta, and it is, where is this used?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, and I don't know if it shows you Process Builder. The field I was looking at didn't, but that would be interesting.
It would. It should look through the whole API or the whole metadata and spot all of the usage of it.
Great.
Let's take a look at my.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it'll actually show you, and it'll show you like if you've got a flow that's got 50 versions, it'll show you 50 instances of that flow too. Doesn't really help with
Nice.
doesn't really help with email templates, and I would love it if they added the version number when they have flows, because it's like, what if I really need to get rid of this field because I'm trying, I've got an unmanaged package and I'm trying to move between different orgs or whatever, and I need to get this field out of there. It could be really tedious, and which versions of the flow have it, so I can, delete those deprecated versions of the flow so that, it's gonna, or what if I'm trying to delete a field, just get rid of it entirely. But I have seen that one pop up. If anyone wants to see it, I've got a dev org I can hop into.
Sure. Let me stop sharing and then you can. You should be able to click the share button. It should be at the bottom of your screen.
Yep, I'm just gotta
Okay.
find that org.
Yep, go ahead.
While you're doing that, I'll share another frustration that I have, and that is related to Chatter. So I've got tied to my app, I've created a flow that when a new text comes in, it sends a Chatter notification to the owner of the conversation so that you see your little notification there at the top that you got a new text. It works fine, except that I discovered in the process of this that you cannot send a Chatter notification to yourself. And when you run when it's in a flow, a Chatter notification appears that it comes from the person who activated the flow, who ran the flow. So I've got a customer who is a one-person org. In fact, she got the org through a OEM, so there's not even a separate. She's the only person in it, and she's a system admin, and there's nobody else that we can log in as to start this flow. And so for a one-person org, starting this flow is impossible. She can't set up the Chatter post to herself.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So when they update the idea exchange, I know where each of you are going to go spend your first 50 votes.
Yeah. Luckily, the OEM that sold her the app, basically, she's getting licensed for Salesforce through this OEM, and they were kind enough to give us a temporary login so that we could log in as someone else and start the flow. But it's kind of
temporary doesn't solve your solution.
I have some potentially helpful information for you on that. I'm actually still trying to reset my password for that other org, but I did run into this issue because we built a flow-based Chatter bot to allow for an approval process that was much more custom than the out-of-the-box one. We needed to be able to dynamically select who the approver was under certain circumstances, and we had users that refused to log into Salesforce and refused to use mobile in order to grant these approvals. So we thought we could save some development hours by doing it with a chatterbot. And we did run into that use case specifically because sometimes there were multiple layers to the approval process. So if I approved at layer 1, but I was also an approver at layer 2, I was replying to my own chatter post. Now, the thing about that is, I'm just typing in a new password here. The thing about that is, so unlike most records in the system, created by ID on a chatter post is not actually what you think it is. The created by ID actually only determines the name of the user that displays in the UI. It's actually governed by inserted by ID. That's the true field that is your created by ID. And the reason why these fields are broken out, and if you don't do anything, they're both going to be the same. But the reason these fields are broken out is for the purpose of org migration. If you bring all those old chatter posts over, you don't want the admin that did your data load to be the user that, the user that made all of these posts. You want to retain who the poster was, even though the record was created by someone else. So Douglas Ayers has a great blog post on how to actually get around this using a custom email handler. It is some development time, but I would recommend looking into that. It's not that hard. I think one of my Apex guys quoted me at 25 hours to spin something like that up. But again, I'd read the post and decide for yourselves. Then I have a totally not best practices solution that I almost feel like we shouldn't even record me describing this. I call it Salesforce Boomerang. Yeah, so Salesforce Boomerang, and never, ever, ever implement this for a real org. This is just one of those things I figured out playing around in on a weekend. Salesforce Boomerang is the only way that I know to move from user context to system context and basically spoof another user using declarative tools. And it's so janky. Don't ever do this, please. But what you do is you use your flow to send an email to case that contains all the parameters you need for the flow to resume. And then when the flow resumes, it's running as the email to case user. Now, in an org that only has one user, that's still not going to solve your solution, but this does allow you to change the context. The reason why Salesforce makes it so difficult to switch back and forth between system and user context or spoof another user is because this could be used to exploit licensure, where you have one full license and a whole bunch of chatter users. And if you really wanted to put the development time into it, you could make a community that looks like all of this real stuff, but really isn't. So they really go out of their way to make it hard to do this because it can result in exploitation of, your contract. So it's not that they don't want us to have this power, it's that it opens the door to getting stuff that you didn't pay for. So I would say the legit solution, check out Doug Ayer's blog on that, and I'll get a link to that. And I'm going to go ahead and share.
Go ahead. While you're doing that, I dropped a link into his blog site, not that particular article, but it's there for anybody who wants to go dig around for anything else that he's got out there.
Yep. So hopefully everyone's seeing the correct screen and not like my inbox or something embarrassing.
Nope, we're seeing Salesforce Lightning.
All right, and I believe this was on, so I'm going to just go to Object Manager. So this is a GS0 pre-release org. I do a lot of new release coverage. This org will actually get updated a full month before sandboxes. And anybody can get this. All you have to do is there's like a 1 week window where you just have to camp like the pre-release sign up page, and then you'll keep getting like a 404 page not found error, and then for 1 week you'll have access. They try not to advertise it too much because there's only one server, but this is a really great way to stay ahead of the curve and to be release ready. So let's see. So this is this new button that we're talking about, and you just click on it, and it's going to tell you, for example, this field's being used in a Wave data flow, and it tells me which flow it's being used in. And it's a pretty good button. I don't have a ton in this org because, again, I just use it for new release coverage, so I can say when the new release is coming up, here are the features that we're going to be seeing in Einstein Analytics, and I tend to get a good amount of traffic on that, but it's a really ugly org. The only other downside of these is they don't have a lot of data in them. It's not like a Trailhead org, and while you do keep these orgs for life, what data you do have tends to get really stale. And it's not like you can, if you wanted to see how your org is going to look, you would literally have to package up everything you have and migrate it over, and it would be a huge lift to keep it in sync, because it's not like you can connect it to other orgs. But it is a really great place to go and check out features, especially that first week when it comes out, and go find all the bugs before they have a chance to patch them. But yeah, so purpose of why I'm sharing, here's our new button. Tells you everywhere it's being used, including page layouts.
And that's supposed to be live for everybody in spring, right?
Yep, that's going to go live between, I think some orgs are getting them around February 11th. Some are getting it the following weekend.
Okay, thank you. All right, next topic or question. We certainly do not have to go to the top of the hour, but I'll just give you all another second or two to think about. And if any of you are working on a process builder, workflow, any kind of automation, you've got Pete on the line. Take advantage of his knowledge and expertise, because I tell you what, he's going to be my go-to person when I have issues. Hope you don't mind, Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, maybe I'll start doing videos on him.
Yeah, Pete, maybe you can talk about the new Flow Builder. Are you happy with it?
In a very forward-looking way, yes. So the new Flow Builder, I feel that there was kind of a rush to get it out because Salesforce's hand is kind of being forced in the sense of, the deprecation of Flash, and it's really coming from Adobe and coming from Google. They don't really have a choice. They have to get that old Flash player out of there. And on the one hand, I'm extremely happy because it's not nearly as laggy. When you have a flow, that has 375 nodes touching 18 different objects, it gets really, really laggy when you start typing in a variable name in the formula editor and it's like, okay, go get a cup of coffee. Or a screen that has too many input fields and you try to move them. Okay, go get a cup of coffee and hope that it revives. But there are a few features that I feel aren't quite there yet. Some of it is just me getting used to it, where just the way that we're interacting with it is a little bit different. I have no objections with that. But there are a couple killer features that are not there yet that I strongly rely upon, which I imagine, and Alex Edelstein said, yes, these are known gaps, and these are very high on the list for features to be implemented within the near future. And that would be an undo redo, which is a little bit less important for me, but also copy and paste. The ability to copy and paste nodes is something that I leverage constantly. And it's a little frustrating that I don't have that currently. But as long as they say that they're going to get it to us, that's good enough for me. I also feel that there's now, instead of clicking on a blank spot of the canvas, like I would expect to be able to click on a blank spot of the canvas and drag, but you actually have to toggle this move canvas button to move around within the editor. And then I keep forgetting to untoggle it back to be able to interact with nodes. And I'm like clicking on something and I'm wondering, why isn't it working? I feel a lot of that's going to be my personal learning curve to it. On the pros side, some of these new screen elements that we have are really, really nice. We've got dependent pick lists. We've got validations for phone number fields. A lot of new, we have a slider. We have a toggle, and this is really kind of, we're beginning to see the fruition of the promise that was made that Flows and Lightning were going to play nicer together. So some of these actually started out as Lightning components that you could download from Alex's from Alex's GitHub via his blog, where he had one that it was like, okay, you can do a lookup on account in a flow screen, and then directly below that, you can have a lookup to contacts filtered based on the account that you selected, and they behave exactly like regular Lightning page lookups where you can type ahead and stuff. And that was something that was a total feature gap in the old Flow Builder. So we had his blog where we could download these Lightning components. Now it's just native. And there's actually a new section of the App Exchange for this sort of stuff. So I'm really glad to see the direction that it's moving in. Although I wish that there was a little bit more parity in the onset, but when we looked at the original conversion from Classic to Lightning, I would say that this is a much stronger feature parity than we had then. So I'm actually really impressed with what they've done. It does not have the feeling of slap together minimum viable product, let's get it out the door. It is very robust, and the list of things that are missing or frustrating is significantly shorter than you would expect for, first time out of the gate. It's never been in production before. Let's take a look and see what happens. It's actually working pretty well for me. I would say though that if these features are critical for you, then just uncheck that box, use the Classic editor for now, keep an eye on it, get comfortable with it. But once you edit a flow in the new designer, that version is now that version, and anything after that version can only be edited in the new designer. You would have to go back to a version prior to that to be able to, and you'd lose any changes that you made if that was the decision that you made.
Cool. So you mentioned a flow with, hundreds of nodes. Why wouldn't you factor that out, since a flow can call another flow?
It just kind of happened. Usually I try that particular flow it should have actually been subflows. But it was just kind of a business cadence thing where it was a very demo intensive sprint where we were constantly showing off new functionality. So what we should have done is really that there's a table of contents screen where you check off one of 7 boxes that I want to do one of these 7 things. And then it walks you through one of the, one or more of these 7 sections that should have been 7 separate flows. But a lot of times it's because even within that, if you break it up, you're looking at the sub elements, the subsections of this have typically 50 to 60, 70-ish nodes. And those I don't really think can be broken out anymore, because we're giving the users a ton of different options. We're governing over I think like 8 or 9 different objects that are completely controlled through this flow wizard, to basically just, it's a guided process for end users to configure all sorts of different things. I'm trying to best explain this without, giving away any client details. But I guess one thing was it evolved a little bit too organically and a little bit too quickly. And also, yeah, I would agree, this should have been 7 separate subflows. But, it's just what it became.
It occurs to me that a lot of people using flows are people who have not had any programming design training on sort of factoring things out like that. That might be your Dreamforce speech is flow design and how to break things out and to, plan things out into subflows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I haven't seen much written on that.
Once we actually did kind of get to the point where it was like, hey, we saw that coming and we're like, yeah, we maybe this needs to be better broken out as multiple subflows. What we actually considered doing was, instead of saving as a new version, you can save as a new flow. So what we considered doing was just saving 7 copies and deleting everything out of it.
Yeah.
And then they said, the client actually said, well, it's never calling more than one of those sections at once. You're never going more than a few nodes without, or more than 8 or 10 nodes without a screen. So the only thing about it that's difficult for them was, well, it's a little hard to read, but their developers actually said, oh, I like it. The way you've got this little bar going across the top and then it drops down into these different zones. It almost feels like a class with methods. And so we just said, well, it was just creating extra work for ourselves for, a mild boost in having it better compartmentalized. So we decided to leave it as is.
Yeah.
But also fewer variables to pass back and forth between master and subflows.
All right. Well, one of the features I don't think is in there that I'd love to see, when you're writing code, good code has got good comments in it, so you can keep track of things. And having comments in a flow would be great.
Well, the old editor had a step node, which was a placeholder, and you could not activate a flow that had them, so I didn't really see much value in that. Yeah. I tell myself use the description, which is on almost every node and almost every resource type.
Yeah, but you can't see those in the big view.
I don't know about the new editor, but on the old editor, if you clicked on any given node in the usage section, if the tab on the left would pop up that description. But I agree with you. It would be really nice to just be able to annotate a flow, like, have a layer that you could turn on that was just like a text editor where you could just have closing little blocks of text. There's one for the idea.
I was going to say, now you guys are dividing up your votes.
Yeah.
Got my vote.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Peter, for that explanation. That was good. All right, time check. We are at 2 minutes before the hour. Unless we've got anything else, I would just like to say, Pete, thank you so much for joining us today and being our automation and flow expert. I really appreciate you agreeing to that when I contacted you yesterday or day before. So everybody else, I guess we'll just reconnect on the 1st or February 2nd, whatever that Friday is, first Friday of February. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for your questions, your comments, and sharing your resources. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Great. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.